Hey, what's going on, everyone? Here I am starting another artwork. This one is with Mandalorian and Boba Fett, Baby Yoda, and a few starships in the sky with a TIE fighter, make it more dynamic. So here I'm working on the helmet on the Beskar armor. I do a lot of my line work in small details with the Pastel pencils because I can get those to a sharper point and they don't break as easy. But the trade-off is, compared to the Caran is they're not as vibrant. The Caran are very saturated colors, but being more saturated means they're softer, so you gotta be more careful with them, and it's harder to get details with them. So I use a combo of both pencils. And working on the Beskar armor, I did a lot of the line work, the black line work on there with my Pastel pencil, and a lot of the highlights with my Carbothellos. And when I was working on the Beskar armor, I start off with the base color gray, but I use a cool gray, not just a plain gray, because the difference is the cool grays have a touch of blue to it. So that makes it more interesting, it makes it pop better, it just looks better. And then I'll add some greens and pinks and blues to the metal to make it look reflective. As you can see, I did a lot of the white on the Beskar armor, and then I added subtle hints of color around that. So that's how I made that glowy look. And on the leather, I do a lot of texturizing with my Carbothellos. I also layer that with the reddish brown. I don't use just regular brown because it's just kind of boring. That's why it's got kind of like a reddish tint to it. Now, when you're working a highly detailed piece like this, you need to do one section at a time. Like, don't stress yourself out, because it's going to take time. If you try and look at the entire piece and are constantly thinking when you're going to finish it, you're going to lose interest in it, you're going to get overwhelmed, and you're going to want to give up. So something like this piece took me about 80 hours, about 2 weeks. And the way, like I said, the way I did is just doing small section at a time. Do you see how I did the belt? The belt was maybe a couple hours. I just focus only on the belt. And then I'll move on to another piece on his little holster, holding his little weapon. And then I'll go to the Beskar armor, and I'll do those little plates one by one, each little piece. It's like a puzzle that's coming together. Adding some different colors, all kinds of different colors to the metal armor to make it look shiny. And like I said, I start off with a base gray and add color on top of that. I use a base gray, then I start working lighter. I work in an unorthodox style. Sometimes I go light to dark, sometimes I go dark to light. It just depends on what I'm working on and what works best to get that section looking good and completed. On this, I did a base color on his leather pants, a base color brown with reddish tint, and then I start adding the wrinkles with my Carbothello black pencil, and then I start adding highlights on the leather. So for the leather, I did the highlights last. I did the mid-tones, then the dark tones, and then the highlights. Now here I'm working on his leg armor pieces, section at a time. The Beskar armor, then down to his boots, doing all the little stitching, and I added some greens to it. Here's some more armor plates. Like I said, doing line work with the black Carbothello pencil, it works best for me. I can get it to a nice sharp point. I can sharpen it in a pencil sharpener. The Carbothello pencils you cannot use in any pencil sharpener. It will break the lead. I've tried so many sharpeners, nothing works. I have to do it manually. And I use an electric sander hook connected to a vacuum when I sharpen my Carbothellos. Here we are on Boba Fett doing his helmet, doing base greens, then I'll start doing some lime greens and then some darker greens. I even added a little bit of blue to it and a little bit of pinks. It's not just going to be 2 tones of green, it's like 4 plus blue plus the pink. You want to be diverse, use different colors. It looks better, makes it pop more off the page. Here I am doing little details, working this little jetpack, doing the highlights on that. When I work my foundation for the drawings, I do my pencils with a 3mm or 5mm mechanical pencil, and then I'll do the highlights with my Carbothello white pencils. By doing a lot of the highlights in my line work. It makes a guide for it. It makes it easier for me for when I start coloring it. Here I'm working on the gun piece. I did a little wood texture in the handle. Now I'm on the barrel, the scope, just doing little piece at a time. I do the line work first, so because that leaves me a guide. The line work is important. You want to do the line work first and then use that as your guide to when you start adding color to it. It makes it 10 times easier. Here's doing some more armor pieces, a little bit of green, darker greens, highlights, and you can see I did some more blues onto it. Now for those gold pieces, I use it looks orange yellow, but I don't use bright colors on that and use more of a subtle orange. And it just looks better that way. It's like you want it to be colorful, but you don't want it to be too colorful. It just takes practice and you'll develop your own style. You'll see what works best for you. I mean, I've been drawing, 37 years, 38 years. So don't give up. You'll find your own style. It just takes time. Do what you love and also what people are interested in. I mean, for me, I got to do what the fans like, but I also have to find something that interests me as well. Because if it's not something you enjoy, you won't put 100% effort into it. So I love doing this movie stuff, pop art, video game art, movie art. That's just kind of what I found myself, my career in. Here's Baby Yoda using base color greens, adding darker greens for the wrinkles in his hand, highlights, bright white around his fingers, and his little wool coat. I used a base color tan, then add some dark brown, and then an off-white for the highlights. An off-white is like a white that has a yellow tint to it. So on that wool, I used a yellow tinted white color, like a light brown. It's hard to explain. But here I am doing a few more wrinkles, working on his coat, taking one step at a time, doing a few little line work on that. Did you see how I have the white wrinkles added in already? The reason why I used the white was so I can use it as a guide, because that white's going to get covered when I put color into it. Here I'm working on the TIE Fighter. This one took a while, probably took several hours, just doing each little component at a time. Here I'm doing the line work with the black pencil, just doing section at a time, going all around the ship. This took maybe 4 hours to complete the Starship. And just adding color, same thing, adding color on top of all the line work. Also, another thing to mention is after I do my line work, in the beginning stage before I color, I apply a fixative to it. I use a Krylon workable fixative, but I don't use heavy coats. I spray 2 or 3 light coats on top of that and on top of the drawing in case I need to erase something later on. But I never ever use fixative after it's been colored. I never use that because that will dull your colors out. So here I am on this part. I added the blue with paint. I just used a gouache or an acrylic blue paint, and I just put it in one tone. And because it was such a huge section, it's less messy for when I add the pastels. So I just put the base color blue, and I'm adding the lighter color pastels. I use the pan pastels on this as well. I forgot to tell you, that's that little tool I have. Pan pastels is great for working soft areas like clouds and things like that. All the links to the supplies that I use are in the bio or in the profile below the video. And on those little lasers, I use white in the core, then a little bit of pink, and then red around that. And the mountains in the background, gave them a lot of blue tint because, the farther something is out, the more bluer it gets. And then the closer mountains and dirt areas are more brown right here because they're closer to you, so you see their true color. Anything that's farther has more of a blue tint. Anything that's closer has more of its natural colors to it. And I'm working around these little troopers' helmets first because it's easier that way for when I draw them afterwards. I don't have to erase as much. And on those helmets, I know they're white, but I didn't use too much white because guess what? They're in the sand. and they're dirty, so you don't want to use too much white. Use like light browns, light tans, off whites. I only use pure whites on those helmets on the reflective parts. Now there, I did a little bit of dirt right there, working on the little iron rods. I guess they're iron rods or iron something, spears maybe, and doing a little bit of the ragged fabric underneath, and just doing some more base color browns, tans, and then adding some darker browns. Here I go, adding off-white and more darker browns. I just go back and forth. All those little spots that you see in the artwork, that's just splatter for texture. I just splattered some black paint on it just to make it a little more interesting. It's really just adding texture to it. There I am working on the rocks, doing each rock at a time. Little cracks and crevices. Just working all around this drawing, trying to get it done. Take your time. And another helmet in the sand. Added a little grays to it. A little bit of, not yellows. It's like a burnt sienna. Burnt sienna or a burnt umber? Can't remember. But you'll test out your colors and you'll figure out what works. There's a lot of helmets I had to do in this one, so those have a lot of details that you just got to take your time on that and do one helmet at a time. And here we are getting close to finishing this piece and working some more of the mountains, and those mountains are far away. I put Baby Yoda behind the mountain just to make it look more interesting. And here we are getting to the final stretches of this drawing. This was a long one. I don't do these big pieces all the time. It's like every few artworks I'll do one big piece because I get burned out. So doing finishing touches on the drawing, just finishing up. After I'm done with the entire drawing, I'll polish the whole thing up for a few hours just to get parts that I missed, because there's always something that you miss. So just go over the drawing several times. And I added a black border with black paint around it just to make it look more 3D effect. Hey everyone, thanks for watching my video on the Mandalorian 2 drawing. I had a lot of fun with this one. It was done entirely with pastel pencils. On this I use a mixture of two different kinds of pencils. I use my Carbothello pastel pencils. These are a less expensive compared to the Caran that I usually use. But I like these because you can get them in sharp, fine points for when you're working in the detail. And I think they're really good quality pencil. So I never stick with just one. I always use different types of pencils to achieve the effects that I'm trying to achieve. And this one I just did a regular blue sky. I used my pan pastels for doing the clouds, and I used my tool right here. This is like a blender. It's got a little sponge tip on top, and these come with your pan pastels when you purchase them. So as you saw in the video, that's all just slightly feathering the clouds around this drawing. And you got Baby Yoda right here, Boba Fett, or Baby Yoda, Grogu basically. And you've got the Boba Fett's Starship right here, and the TIE Fighter. Got the Mandalorian right here. Had a lot of fun working on the Beskar armor. And when you're doing metallics, make sure you add colors in them. You see, it's not just gray and black. There's different colors. There's like green, there's pinks, there's oranges, and there's reds in here to really make it pop off the canvas. And you got a couple of the soldiers' heads on spikes right there, like as you've seen. It's kind of a nod to the show with that scene in Mandalorian. And I got the background mountains going on here, and got some cool colors, got some browns right here, some tans. Had a lot of fun doing this little pile of rocks right here, and I did those mostly with my Carbothello pencils. I did a black border around it just to make the artwork pop more. As you can see, I put the Starship in front of the black border. It makes it kind of like a 3D effect. Got some blasters going as the Starship is chasing the TIE Fighter, trying to get some movement on the piece. But anyways, yeah, if you like my videos, if you enjoyed these, make sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to know when I put up new artworks. And that's about it. Thanks very much for watching the video. Oh, one more thing. I posted the links to the pencils that I use underneath in the description below if you want to check those out. So thanks again, everyone. Until the next video.